We hear of nothing during his sojourn at Auxonne throughout the year 1790. Nothing either during his stay at Valence, in Corsica, or in Paris in the middle of the year 1792, nor during the first southern campaign against the Federals, nor at Toulon. We must pass over a space of some 4 years. The lieutenant has become a general. Bonaparte commands the artillery and the army of Italy. Attached to this army as emissary from the convention was the citizen Louis Turreau, called Turreau de Lignières, one of its most influential members. Accompanied by the young wife he had lately married, the daughter of a surgeon of Versailles, he arrived at Cairo in Piedmont, where Napoleon was quartered at the close of the year too, probably on the 5th San Culottide, September 21st, 1794. Bonaparte found great favor with the deputy, and still more with the deputy's wife. Their connection can hardly be termed a liaison, for Madame Turreau was the most fickle of her sex, but it was more than a mere passing caprice. So much were both husband and wife impressed by the young general's talents that Turreau, conjointly with Barras, moved that the command of the troops should be given to Bonaparte on the 13th of Vendemiaire, that day a peril for the convention, and associated himself with the Corsican deputies as surety for his nominee. Bonaparte remembered this service on his appointment as commander-in-chief of the army of Italy. He took Turreau, who had not been re-elected, as storekeeper. Turreau was again accompanied by his wife, who, failing generals on this occasion, was content with smaller game, hence many storms in the Turreau household, and the husband is even said to have died of grief at his wife's conduct. Madame Turreau returned to Versailles and lived there for a time in great poverty during the Empire, after various fruitless attempts to find a protector. One day at a hunting party, Napoleon mentioned her to Berthier, who had known her from childhood, being herself a native of Versailles. He had hitherto put her off when she appealed to him, but now took the opportunity of presenting her to the emperor. Napoleon at once granted all her requests, and even went far beyond her expectations. The love passages of Napoleon's youth seem so far to have consisted of unimportant flirtations or commonplace intrigues, with the exception of Madame Turreau, who threw herself at his head and may be accounted a conquest. Women seem to have taken little notice of the young officer, thin, pale, badly dressed, and careless of appearances. He, on his part, seems to have been too much occupied with dreams of glory to bestow much thought on them. Another excellent reason for his chastity existed. He was poor, and like other poor men, he began to think of securing a woman for himself by marriage. Chapter 2. Matrimonial projects. When visiting his sister-in-law, Madame Joseph Bonaparte, at Marseille, Bonaparte amused himself by playing the lover to Madame's sister, Désirée Eugénie Clary, a pretty girl of 16, whom he was fond of calling his little wife. Désirée took the matter seriously. Her childish ways were soon laid aside, and as if by magic, a passionate attachment was developed. "Oh, my beloved," she writes to Napoleon, "take care of yourself, if only to preserve your Eugénie, who could not live without you. Be faithful to the vows you made to me, as I will be to mine." There is a genuine and spontaneous tenderness in these letters of Eugénie's. After the fashion of the day, the young girl, who was known by the name of Désirée, rechristened herself for her lover's benefit, desirous that the name by which he called her should be sacred to him alone. Rough copies of the letters were discovered 65 years later among the papers of her who had written them, and preserved them as relics. They are conceived in the very spirit of that age of reaction towards love and life, after a period when death had long been the only spectacle, the only preoccupation. Women, more especially, were turning to love as a new religion, the only creed that had survived the wreck of civilization. The acquaintance dated from January of the year 1795. The betrothal, if any formal engagement were entered into must have taken place on April 21st, the day that Napoleon passed through Marseille on his way to Paris. Joseph and his wife, Julie Clary, favored the match. They, in fact, had planned it together, and no opposition was to be feared from the Clary family, the father to whom has been attributed the remark that one Bonaparte was enough in the family, died on January 20th, 1794. Desiree, who was not 13 or 14 at the time, as she afterwards wrote, declared, and caused to be officially printed, but 16 or 17, the date of her birth being November 9th, 1777, had only her mother and sister to consult, or rather, seeing the strength of character she exhibited, it would perhaps be nearer the mark to say that she had only herself to please. No objection could be made on the score of age. In those days, it was usual for girls to marry before 18, and the author of the first civil code had just fixed the legal age at 13 for the woman. As to fortune, if Julie had been content with the elder brother, who had no sort of position, Desiree might well take the younger, who was at least general of his brigade. Bonaparte, who arrived in Paris in May in a very poverty-stricken plight, placed all his hopes on this marriage. If it should fall through, there seemed to be nothing left for him but to go and take service in Turkey, or to become, like so many others, a speculator in national property. Even when his fortunes mended somewhat and he was employed by the Commission of Public Safety in drawing up plans of campaign, he felt that the occupation chance had procured for him was extremely precarious. From these difficulties, Desiree alone could deliver him, and he pressed his brother to get him an answer. In every letter he wrote to Joseph, there were messages for her. She, for her part, was also corresponding with him. She asked for his portrait. He had it taken and sent it to her. When she traveled to Genoa with her sister and brother-in-law and ceased to write, he reproached her for her silence and remarked that the river Leth hath apparently to be crossed by those who enter Genoa. At last he abruptly demanded a definite answer. Joseph was commissioned to speak to Eugenie's brother. Let me know the result and end the matter. The next day, before Joseph could receive his letter, he wrote again. The affair must be settled one way or the other, he declares. I await your reply impatiently. A month passed, bringing nothing but occasional messages of remembrance between him and the little 14-year-old maiden of Marseille, not strictly beautiful perhaps, but full of charm, with her penciled eyebrows, her soft eyes, her tilted nose, her delicately curling lips, her chaste, reserved, yet tender air. Paris had interposed, that great unknown city which Bonaparte had entered with patched boots, a shabby uniform, and two famished aides de camp, and Paris had shown him her women, creatures matchless in grace, in elegance, in trickery, whose painted cheeks lend a strange brilliance to their eyes, whose cunning toilettes accentuate all the charms of their persons and disguise, or rather beautify, all their doubtful points. Beings of gaiety and pleasure, modified and refined by society, like hothouse fruits in their opulent maturity, decked out by the merchant for the market, with false colors and a suspicious bloom, that have never felt the touch of sun or wind, fruits very different to the somewhat green produce of the ungrafted tree, which, ripening under the flame of the one and the keen blast of the other, is apt, in spite of its fresh and tonic properties, to leave a slightly crude and pungent flavor on the plate. Here alone, wrote Bonaparte, among all the places on earth woman might justly aspire to dominion, a woman needs 6 months of Paris to learn what is due to her and what her empire may really be. And a few days later he writes, women, more beautiful here than everywhere in the world, are the all-absorbing business of life in Paris. Yes, they were indeed the fairest of their century, those women of 30, of 35, and even of 40 years old, adepts in the art, if not of loving, of making themselves beloved. Bonaparte, having nothing but his hand to offer, promptly offered that to Madame de Permont and to Madame de la Bouchardie. Afterwards, Madame de l'Esparta, before that eventful Vendemiaire came around, when Madame de Beauharnais was finally induced to take him at his word, hence silence, complete and unbroken on his side towards Desiree, and on hers a lament, soft and tender as the vibration of broken heartstrings. You made my life a misery, and I'm yet weak enough to forgive you. So you are married! Your poor Eugenie must no longer love you or think of you. My sole consolation now is to know that you believe me faithful to your memory. Beyond this, I have nothing to desire but death. Life has become a torture to me, now that I may no longer hope to dedicate it to you. You married! I cannot face the thought. I cannot survive it. You shall see that I will be truer to our vows, and though you have broken the bonds that united us, never will I plight my trust to another. Never will I marry. I wish you all the happiness and prosperity in your marriage. I pray that the wife you have chosen may make you as happy as I had hoped to make you, and as you deserve to be. But in the midst of your happiness, pity the fate of Eugenie, and do not quite forget her. Bonaparte, whose nature was incapable of forgetfulness, looked back with regret, not untinged with remorse, upon the episode, the youthful love of which he had no doubt inspired a larger share than he had felt, had been at first a childish pastime on which he had gradually built up a scheme of ambition, but it had broken the heart of a young girl. He seemed all his life to have sought to atone for and repair the disaster when at Milan in 1797 he devised a marriage for Desiree, who at the time was at Rome with her sister and her brother-in-law Joseph, who had the appointment of ambassador at the papal court. He dispatched General Dufault with a warm letter of recommendation, a distinguished officer, a man of the highest character. A marriage with him would be most advantageous. Dufault arrived and was well received. The betrothal was about to take place. Then came the terrible scene of December 28th. Desiree's bridal robe was stained with her lover's blood. At last, after rejecting various proposed suitors, Desiree agreed to marry General Bernadotte. This was during Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign. The suitor was undeniably a good match, though one of the most insufferable of Jacobinical prigs, Beauharnais, without the quick wit and lively manners of the Gascon, but with the calculating astuteness that stood its owner in good stead in the double game he was constantly playing. Madame de Staël, congenial pedantry was his ideal of feminine perfection, and he spent his honeymoon in giving dictation lessons to his young wife. The news of the marriage reached Bonaparte at Cairo. It was not altogether to his taste, for Bernadotte was his enemy, but he cordially wished Desiree happiness, the happiness she deserves.